Warna kamu, iya kamu, itu dia kamu, na emiyo.
Lo cuidamos a ella nos cuida también, nos da alimentos. Si lo utilizamos mal, pues también ella misma nos va a castigar.
I say continue looking at that forest even he died. I'm interested in planting more and more.
Het is die godvergeten mooi. Dus onthouden is één waarheid die we nu leren in deze film. Ja. Auw!
What is my passion for the planet? Is my passion planting trees? Is my passion speaking on behalf of other people? What do you think you want to fight for?
Try to be the change you want to see in the world.
We arrived as individuals with very different stories, but we all shared a dream.
When you control food, you control society. But when you control seed, you control life on Earth.
When you're one step away from success, that's when they want you to think you're the furthest. But you are close. You are close.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Filmmakers panel of the New Vision for Earth Film Festival. My name is Natasha Kimani, and I'm the head of partnerships and research at Africa No Filter, and I will be your moderator for the day. This is the culmination of amazing online conversations with filmmakers we started in September and that you can rewatch on the Film Festival page with the G11 Nairobi 2023 platform. Register for free, and besides the questions and answers, watch an interesting selection of 8 films telling stories of people acting for climate, for the environment all over the world. You may find inspiration and a way to join the movement. All these films will be available for free until tomorrow night, Nairobi time. We are sharing the Film Festival page in the link in the chat below. So please take time to watch, give us feedback, and enjoy yourselves. Now, I have the honor of welcoming my guests. It's a great privilege for me to share this conversation with you. And I am here today with Anthony, an ecologist, photographer, educator, and filmmaker, and is the director of The Forest Guardian. Welcome, Anthony. Edilma, an investigative journalist and founder and director of the independent media agenda Propria, and she co-directed the Song of Magware. I may massacre this name, the Juli's Words of Advice. Juma, a multimedia broadcast journalist, is the producer of Echo Warriors of Africa. Prince, an activist, justice campaigner, and co-founder of 350 Kenya Power Shift, is a programs manager in Africa of the Laudato Si movement, which is the impact producer of the film The Letter, A Message for Our Earth. And Samuel, who will be joining us as we go on with the program, is an activist, and I will talk about him when he joins the call. But let's get to it, and welcome to my fantastic guests. Thank you for taking the time to join us in this beautiful conversation. I'm going to begin with all of you. And, first let me begin with Edilma, the only woman on the call. What brought you to this path? How did you start telling stories?
Hola, muchas gracias.
Yeah.
Nació de la violencia armada del conflicto armado colombiano, que se presenta hace más de 50 años. Creo que una generación de periodistas y de narradores que vivíamos especialmente en zonas rurales, en zonas campesinas, en zonas indígenas, en Colombia, en América Latina, fue necesario empezar a contar historias de dignidad, de resistencia y sobre todo hacer memoria de lo que pasaba en el marco del conflicto armado. Esa transformación, digamos, del periodismo nos ha llevado en los últimos años a cubrir historias sobre las realidades de los pueblos indígenas en Colombia y en América Latina. Y allí nació y surgió el medio independiente Agenda Propia, que hoy lidero, y tiene una comunidad de narradores que se llama La Red Tejiendo Historias en América Latina. Entonces, mi camino como periodista inició por los conflictos armados, por las realidades de violencias, pero también por la necesidad de darle voz a los pueblos indígenas particularmente hoy, que han alzado su voz de alerta, de alarma por la crisis climática, también por la presencia de grupos armados legales e ilegales en los territorios, pero sobre todo para recuperar sus memorias vivas que también están siendo afectadas por las crisis climáticas.
Thank you, Adama. Around institutional memory and why it's important to preserve the same. Anthony, I'm also curious to hear, what brought you to this path? How did you start telling these significant stories?
I don't know how to put it, but mine was a bit of a more of an impact-driven approach. I went to school and studied wildlife management, and this was something passionate for me. But when I went back home and talk about wildlife and birds, it was something that was not relatable to the same people who took me to school. So I asked myself, where is the conflict, or where is the problem? Because I felt corrupt. I can't be talking about conservation in a different space. Why my own people or my own family members understand why birds are important or trees are important. They will have actually understood it in a couple of levels, but then I felt, how best do I communicate to them? How best do I break down the science that I learned in school and bring it back to them in a more consumable way? So I switched a bit just to get into photography as a powerful tool, because images speak a lot just with one still, and then later went into motion storytelling. But then a combination of both has really helped me just define and share more about my passion to an audience that does not necessarily have or played any key role in my career, but making sure they understand that conservation is the backbone of our political, social, and economic structures. And it is not for the elite. It is not for a given group of people. It is meant for each and every person. So the need of me getting to the space was, how do I break down the barriers of this information to reach each and every person, so that scientists can stop talking to themselves, but then some scientists can now talk to the people who actually interact with nature on a day-to-day basis. So that's how it actually happened. It happened so fast, I didn't even notice it was happening. But then when it once happened, I was just like, yes, this is something I can do for the rest of my life. Yeah. So that's how the switch happened.
Well, we're happy to have you, and I love it. You're making conservation relevant and relatable. I love it. Thank you for that. We're going to move on to Prince, and I'd love to hear your story and journey into conservation. Please let us in on that journey.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Natasha. And thank you to the GLF Nairobi for giving us this opportunity to share with the global audience. So I'm going to speak on behalf of Laudato Si movement. And in a sense that this is institutional film, so I would like to bring that into light. So in 2015, Pope Francis released this letter called Laudato Si encyclical, and it's on care for our common home. And in this book, it's in the Catholic term, we call it an encyclical or a letter, but in lay terms, you can just call it a book by Pope Francis. Now, this book talks about our responsibility as human beings and the need to really shift away from over-reliance on the use of fossil fuels. So when this book was released in 2015, and last year it was 7 years, and people reading it here and there, but then we are always aware of this critical message that not everybody picks up a book from the ceiling or from the counter and reads it, and there is need also for new ways of communicating. So in in the year 2022, we say, let's also try these new ways of communicating. And we translated this book, the Laudato Si, into a film. And this film, it's now called The Letter. So if you don't have time to read the letter, then you also have another way of getting Pope Francis' message in terms of audiovisual. And this letter picks in people from different parts of the world. This bringing people together, representing several different types of voices. So we wanted to look at the voice underwater. How do we bring the voice underwater up? How do we bring the voice of the poor up? How do we bring that voice of science to the people themselves? And this is what was the convergence of this idea of looking at these new ways of communicating the same message that was started around 2015, almost 8-10 years ago.
I love that message. So making it relevant and giving people a different platform to consume the message of Pope Francis. I think that's brilliant, and what a wonderful initiative, Prince. Juma, now over to you. We'd love to hear where this story began and why.
Thank you, Natasha. It's a pleasure to be with you here and all these amazing people. I don't think I started telling stories. I was born telling stories. I was born a storyteller. Africa, we are known to be storytellers. I mean, storytelling is one of the biggest folklores in Africa. Our grandparents used to tell us stories, narrate to us stories, bedtime stories, and all that. So personally, I'm a third generation journalist. My grandfather was a journalist. My mom was a journalist. So I was born into that. And my grandfather used to tell me stories. It's a beautiful story about environment and earth. And now I'm telling stories, but they're not the same. I'm telling stories of destruction. So that's the difference. That's why I'm here right now telling this story about drought. So like I mentioned, I think I was born into that. And to me, this started very much earlier. I'm a last born in a family of 8. So I used to, like when I was a kid, I used to gather my siblings to just narrate them how the play was, given the events of the day. So I started journalism way back when I was in high school. So and that's what I knew I wanted to do. So I started from there. So I went to the university and studied that. And that's been my life, basically. So journalism has always been my life from start. And I don't think anything's changing. So yeah, that's my story about it.
I love it. You were born a storyteller and using the history and narratives of who we are to continue to tell beautiful stories. I love how you've captured that, Juma. And thank you all for joining us on this call. So allow me, Juma, to still follow up with a question. And what does the documentary over fiction allow you to tell these environmental stories and social stories you are presenting in the New Vision Earth Festival?
Thank you. I mean, these are real stories about real things that are happening, about real people. And climate change is impacting people. It's real. You see, when you sit to events, when you read the books, when you read all the literature about climate change, it's something else. But when you go to ground and see it, and see the impact it's having on communities, then it's totally a different thing. So I wanted to tell stories about a real thing of climate change that's impacting communities. Basically, I don't even tell this to allow communities to tell their stories, how climate change is affecting them, because they understand the effects much better than I do. If I go here to Tanzania, I don't understand how it's affecting them. But when I give them the platform to narrate their own stories, the story will come out much, much better than I'll ever do. So real stories for me is the thing. I mean, fiction is still good, but we need now to portray things that are happening in real time with the real people, with the real impacts, to make this message across much better.
Absolutely. And thank you for that. Giving people a platform to tell their own stories, giving them a voice to share their stories sounds absolutely brilliant. And Anthony, what was the thinking behind the Forest Guardian? You know, your conceptualization, and what has the impact been thus far?
You know, when Juma was talking, I actually thought of it like, just wait. If you look at how the Bible was written, it was written by guys who had inspiration of writing the Bible into pieces. We've feel like I'm in a room of modern storytellers who are actually rewriting what is happening in the current state of the world at the moment. But then just back to your question, the Forest Guardian. So the Forest Guardian was this amazing story where you meet someone for the first time and you are just like, wow. You have no words. I was working with this gentleman into this particular forest, and the knowledge he had, the information he had carried, and then if you dig deeper, you ask him, where did you learn this? It's like he just learned it on the field and on the go. And then the next question that was asked was that, do people really know about you? And I was just like, no, I'm just doing my thing. And I was just like, I have seen people who are passionate. I am passionate about my work, but when I met Sezi Mugisa, I felt he was way much more passionate about what he was doing than I would thought. And for me, it was just that inspiration of me as an individual, meeting an individual who's so inspiring. And I was in that particular path of switching between science and communication. So I needed people to just inspire me to be able to communicate to me that I'm actually in the right path of whatever I'm doing. And Sezi came in as a very key model or role model in that particular place. But when I was telling the story, I wasn't looking at it from just one angle of me being inspired, but it was coming along during the UN Decade of Restoration, which was happening at that particular time. And I felt I am a wildlife person, and I've seen people do tree conservation projects where people just take pictures of planting trees, but I've never seen people just settle in and nurture those trees to grow for biodiversity. And then you meet this amazing gentleman he can actually tell you a tree is actually so tall and like he planted this in a given particular year. And you're like, okay, now that's amazing. But then you're in a society where people just plant trees for show, for selfies and beautiful and just to push them. But then you meet this gentleman who's actually planted like 391 hectares of tree forest that is now home of 60 chimpanzees. Who does not want to tell that story? I want to tell that story so that everybody else within the space can easily understand that tree planting does not involve just putting the tree on the soil, but involves a process of nurturing it, caring it, and later having the tree have an impact in the society. So that the film, once it was released, it has actually been used as a tool for our education programs in school, which is the mitigation project. So the film has a lesson plan where we inspire young children to see the beauty of them believing in their passions, because this is Sezi who believed in what he loved doing most. Imagine 53 years doing the same thing and never giving up on it. And that is what we need as a society, individuals who are passionate about what they're doing, not necessarily for money, but just ensuring that we live in a society that is equitable and accessible to everyone in terms of natural resources. So Sezi created that particular character to educate and inspire other young people, or even me myself, to be able to keep up doing what I'm doing with passion and resilience and persistence. So the film, when you watch the film, I think the first time I screened the film in an audience of young adults, it was during the Kenya Youth in Forestry Week. And the room just went silent because Sezi just brought in the audience. And for me at that time, I was just like, yes, I have actually passed that information. I was sitting next to one of the organizers of the conference, and she was like, Tony, you've just opened the conference in a very, very simple way, because the theme of the conference is the use of forest sustainably, but at the same time conserving the forest. Yeah. So as much as we say keep off the forest, all you're saying is conserve the patches we have and create more forests so you can use sustainably for forest conservation. So the film has different variables of learning from a personal point of view to now a conservation point of view. And we are continuously airing the film in schools across Uganda and Kenya at the same time. So for me, the film has been one of the major, I call it an impact film for me because I've seen it move people to action in one sector to the other. Yeah.
I love that, moving people to action, but most importantly, getting kids involved. It sounds very altruistic, idealistic, but most importantly, very hopeful and beautiful. Adam, I'm coming straight to you. As an investigative journalist, what was the inspiration behind the song of the Magwere, and why did that story need to be told? Yes.
Gracias. El corto documental El canto del Maguaré, palabra de consejo de Duduji, es un mensaje de un abuelo de la Amazonía colombiana al mundo entero, la humanidad, sobre todos los cambios que se están dando, especialmente de la crisis climática que está afectando a los pueblos indígenas de la Amazonía. El abuelo Benito Teteyá Tiepa, de 77 años, y líder del clan indígena Iñeje, que significa canangucho en su lengua bora, advierte sobre las explotaciones de minería, de petróleo, de maderas, están alterando el calendario ecológico, y esto está afectando la seguridad alimentaria de sus comunidades, pero también está afectando la cultura propia de los pueblos indígenas. Maguaré es un instrumento que se usa en las distintas malocas de la Amazonía colombiana para comunicarse, por eso se llama el canto del Maguaré, pero es justamente para darle más visibilidad a las voces de los abuelos, de las abuelas, de las sabias, que nos están alertando sobre la afectación de la crisis climática y están poniendo en riesgo la vida de los pueblos indígenas. Esta historia la narramos, la tejimos, como decimos, en Agenda Propia, de manera colaborativa con Vanessa Teteyé. Vanessa Teteyé es comunicadora, es periodista, es nieta del abuelo Benito, y juntas llegamos a su comunidad para retratar la historia de su abuelo y de su comunidad. A mí me llamó mucho la atención justamente poder apoyar a narradoras indígenas también para que aprendan, por un lado, un poco sobre la importancia de usar estos nuevos medios, el documental, el cine, el periodismo, para contar sus realidades, pero también desde mi mirada no indígena poder aprender de los saberes de los abuelos. Cuando llegamos a La Maloca, fue muy interesante poder entender desde la visión de un sabio de la Amazonía, del corazón de la selva, qué es lo que está pasando y le está advirtiendo a la comunidad, al mundo entero, que si no protegemos los árboles, las plantas, los ríos, el agua, vamos a desaparecer. Pues antes de empezar esta conversa, les estaba mencionando que en este momento hay una crisis en la Amazonía, en el río Amazonas, en los distintos ríos se está perdiendo el nivel del agua, y seres espirituales como los delfines son seres espirituales para los pueblos indígenas, se están muriendo también. Entonces, un gran aprendizaje que aprendimos narrando esta historia con Vanessa Teteyé, de la familia del pueblo Bora, uno de los pueblos también en riesgo de exterminio físico-cultural, es justamente poder escuchar a nuestros abuelos y nuestras abuelas para que nos cuenten cómo cuidaban la selva, cómo cuidaban los animales, qué significa para la cultura, para la espiritualidad y las cosmovisiones de sus pueblos, vivir en comunidad, vivir en armonía con la selva, y si se acaba, pasa algo grave, no solamente para esas comunidades, sino para la humanidad. A mí me alegró mucho escuchar en las historias de quienes estamos aquí en este diálogo de la palabra, que hablan también de sus abuelos y abuelas. O sea, yo creo que es un momento también para escuchar a las personas, a las generaciones, para que nos den consejo. La serie El canto del Maguaré, palabra de consejo de Duduji, es justamente una primera historia que quiere hacer, es una serie, esta es la primera historia de una serie para escuchar a los sabios y que nos den consejos a las nuevas generaciones de cómo cuidar la selva, cómo cuidar a la humanidad y sobre todo a través de nuestras narrativas, de nuestra forma de hacer cine, periodismo, fotografía documental, podamos también cuidar a la madre selva.
That's incredibly beautiful. You know, not only are you preserving culture, you're giving us an opportunity to learn. And before I move on to Prince and Juma, I'm curious. Do my panelists see any interweaving? Is what Edilma said relatable? Can you relate it to our current context? I see Anthony nodding, and I'd really love to hear from you. Then I'd move on, of course, to both Prince and Juma. You know, how do you see what Edilma is saying relating to the Kenyan and African context, especially, you know, a transfer of knowledge and the issues that they're facing in the Amazon?
You know, for a very long time, indigenous knowledge has been treated as the side information that is not important. But then, trust me, at the moment, people actually realize that indigenous knowledge is the best knowledge you can actually use to be able to solve so many issues on planet Earth. Industrialization is beautiful, and trust me, it's beautiful. But then a combination of both industrialization and indigenous knowledge is actually a success because it now enables us to have a sustainable ecosystem to live in. So I feel, especially for us as Africans, we feel like we need to sit back and get our old folks together and just ask them, how do we do things? How do we learn and adjust from them? Because they had so many awesome rules that really made nature prosper. And some of them they were put because of just restrictions. For example, the owl. In our culture, they say if the owl comes and lands in your tree, somebody will die in the ecosystem, in your family. So everyone will be very, very afraid of the owl. But technically, the owl played a very impacting role in managing rodents within that particular place. So they prospered the conservation of owls. But then at the same time, that information was making them being, if anyone found an owl, they will kill it instantly, just because of how that information was being passed. So indigenous knowledge is important, yes, but then how do we redefine it and be able to fit in a society that is growing so fast? Because every single day, there's a culture that is being adopted. If you look at, I'm gonna talk about the music industry. Any dance move will just be easily picked up. But then, can we pick up our indigenous knowledge just the way we can pick up dance moves and be able to serve ecosystem? So it really relates with all that we see on the current space here.
Absolutely. And Dilma, I'll come back to you to hear whether or not, you know, the African and Kenyan context is relatable, especially to the Colombian Amazon. But before that, I'd really love to hear from Prince and the amazing work that he's doing. But most importantly, you know, the letter, A Message for Our Earth. You know, what was the inspiration and why is it important to tell that story now? You know, why does this story need to be heard by young and old Africans?
Yeah, thank you, Natasha. That submission by Dilma and Anthony really relates to the letter, and I would like to start from there before going into the real story itself. So in the letter, we feature Chief Dada. Chief Dada is an indigenous person from Brazil. So in the letter, we are looking at voices that in some way or the other, they are underlooked or they are seen not to matter when policies are being discussed or when policies are being passed. They do not have a seat on the table to contribute to whatever discussions that are going to influence their life. Now, a background of Chief Dada is that he is a leader of the Novo Lugar community, a community in the Borari tribe. The Borari tribe resides in the Mario indigenous territory, located in the present day Pará, called Pará in Brazil. And the Mario lands include old growth forests, teeming with life and beauty. And logging companies decided invade this forest for their own profit, not for anything else, but for their own profit. And as illegal loggers began to increase their incursions into the Mario territory, Chief Dada became expert in the use of new technique to capture GPS and tagging photographs of their work and activities. And this work created evidence of the loggers' crime, and the authorities decided to descend on the illegal logging companies. As a result of this courageous leadership of Chief Dada, he was captured, he was kidnapped, and he was tortured for days. And something happened that they did not kill him, but Chief Dada says that his God saved him. So in the Borari tribe community, their God is called Tupa. Tupa is like an eagle. I know, is it Anthony who mentioned something like that? So the God came and saved him. And up to now, Chief Dada passes this information of the God, the existing God of the Amazon called Tupa, who saves. So they guard the dwelling place of in the Amazon through this. So we wanted this kind of voices, the indigenous. When Anthony says that our rich history is in that telling the stories, passing from one generation to the other. But indigenous communities, if you look in Kenya, in a greater perspective in Kenya, if you look at the Aware, if you go into the coastal regions of Kenya, if you look at the Bajuni, nobody now they are kind of not in our history, but they're still living there. And if you look at we compare what was happening in Brazil with Chief Dada's community, we also look at what's happening in is it around the Rift Valley region with our own local indigenous people in the forest. We have illegal people going there, but we also know that the indigenous people know really well how to sustainably live in their forests. But when profits come, then we have invaders, then we see that the conflict is going on there. Now, the second voice is the voice under the sea, the marine life, right? You know, we as humans, we carry on our activities on sea, above sea, or maybe if you go a little bit, you go diving. But there is a lot of millions and millions of life under the sea. We have corals there, we have fish there, we have so many things that some have not been yet discovered. And we talk about climate change. You know, the seas, the water bodies are one of the carbon sinks that we have. And whatever we are doing in industrialization, relying on the overuse of fossil fuels, have a greater impact when the corals die themselves. When the corals die themselves, the sea is one of the greatest sinks of that we have right now to protect that. So we have a marine scientist also bringing in that voice down there. And two, we look at the youth. The youth movement is really, really growing. You know, in a Kenyan scenario, you might say that the youth only know how to use TikTok, but that's not the case. In this letter, in this letter, we have an informed youth doing great things for this climate. We call Redhima Pandey. She is an Indian, a young child, and she's one of those youth who took their governments to court for failing to take care of the future of our environment. And in our sense also, there are ways in which the youth have something to say. You know, if the youth now taking their governments that you failed to protect our future. Now, where were we if the youth can take that bold step to go there? Where were we? And are we listening to them? And now this young lady from India coming into a dialogue with the world through a documentary, you know, bringing a real person doing the real change. And just to, that brings into my mind what Juma said about real things. You know, I have someone close I follow who says that injustice is not invincible, and documentaries gives us that opportunity to document injustice. Now, climate change is an injustice. People dying of hunger, that is an injustice. Our world right now, if you read the encyclical itself, is that we have enough for everyone. But there are three words that make us die of hunger or of flooding or of anything. Is avarice. Avarice talks about too much greed, too much greed. It's not just greed, but too much greed. How can we bring that, connect that to someone in Turkana in Kenya, right? Who is supposed, the government has the responsibility to ensure each person has that decent life and basic life, right? So, but we see that if we look at the government expenditure, how much are we losing each year, right? This is just specific to Kenya, but it relates to all the poor and developing countries, right? And two, right now we are seeing the El Nino everywhere. But I want to bring this, specific to the Kenyan, to Kenya as our own country. So in Kenya, just a few days ago, I was talking with colleagues, activists, and saying that when this thing was coming up, we were told it's El Nino. And in Kenya, we've only known, well, not we, but I only know of El Nino of the 1997 or so long ago, which was very worse. And we were told El Nino is coming. And that was what was in most of my friends or circles' minds. But now there is a change of tone that no, it's going to be enhanced rainfall. With me, I'm seeing a connection with some misuse of funds. But how do we record this? In the film, we're going
to come to the misuse of funds soon, because I see one of our other panelists has joined us. And Prince, I promise to circle back on that, because you've raised so many significant points around the youth, around participation, around the impact of indigenous stories. But please allow me to welcome Samuel Emodok. Samuel, can you hear me? Samuel is an activist, teacher, and a representative voice for the Turkana people and culture, and he produced Between the Rains. Samuel, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, and welcome on the call. While we have you, because I know your connection is a bit challenging, maybe you could just give us a brief deep dive into, Between the Rains, the journey behind the story. What brought you to tell this story, and how did you start telling stories? But most importantly, tell us the story behind Between the Rains.
Get actually from the beginning of the meeting, but I didn't manage because of this poor signal.
Yes. Did you hear my question, Samuel?
No, I didn't hear.
No worries at all. My question was, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about Between the Rains, the story behind Between the Rains.
Yeah, Between the Rains is a feature film.
Yes.
That seeks to understand the experiences of a childhood caught within a traditional culture that is a casualty of climate change. Over the past years, the Turkana community and the neighboring other pastoral communities have been enjoying the fruits of living under a conducive environment where there were no prolonged droughts. But all of a sudden, as the time goes on.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please continue.
Yeah, maybe I can apologize for my poor strength, the signal strength.
Don't worry.
Yeah. So when Andrew and Moses approached us, we already had the idea to air the challenges that we are facing as the pastoralist communities.
As we wait for someone's connection, Juma, over to you, kind sir. And maybe, Juma, you could just give us some insights behind, as a broadcast journalist, maybe you could give us some insights behind Eco Warriors of Africa. And, because both you and Adilma are journalists, I'd be quite curious to hear the lens in which you took and if there's any relatability in your work. But over to you, Bwana Juma.
Thank you. And it's really unfortunate that you couldn't hear Emodok clearly.
Yes.
But hopefully you get him. So, Eco Warriors of Africa. Africa really produces less than 3% of climate changing gases, but we are told that the continent is the most vulnerable to the effects of it. So when I proposed this documentary to the Voice of America, my editors were, oh, this is really great. So they were giving me, I was working with the executive producers in Washington. So they were telling me these big names in Africa who are activists and all that, that I should feature in the documentary. But I told them no. And they were like, oh, what do you mean? I mean, you're talking about equal. These are the people we know about that are talking about it. And I told them, no, there are young people in this continent who are doing things in their own small ways, but that matters and that needs to be told. So the continent, as I mentioned, is under attack. So basically, the continent needs warrior. The continent needs eco-warriors who are going to fight this global monster that's climate change. So I chose to work with really unknown young people who are doing small things in their own small ways. My first character, Cindy Saru in the Kenyan coast, who is restoring coral reefs at the Kenyan coast. Before my featuring her in the documentary, she had not had much media attention. But now, after our documentaries, she's been getting so much attention. She's telling me her phone has not stopped ringing. She's been getting nomination to different awards and she's winning, which is really good. She's just 24 and she's working with her community to restore a problem that's affecting the community, the local community there, the fishing community, the coral reef degradation really affecting the community because it's affecting the fish. And that really has a direct economic impact on them. So my second character, Abdi is a Kenyan at the Kenyan northern eastern part of the country, where drought has really ravaged the area. Now, what did he do? He didn't sit back and say, "Oh, Africa, we are the most valuable. We are going to be affected." He decided that he's going to plant 1 million trees in the arsal areas. Sounds crazy, but he's doing it. He's already done that. He's already planted 1 million trees, and now he has changed the target. He has moved to 10 million trees in 5 years. And that's amazing. So I thought I wanted to tell those stories of young people in the continent who are not just sitting back complaining, saying, oh, Africa this, oh, Africa is suffering, but they're moving to take action to remedy the problem. My third character in the film, Shamim, also just a 24-year-old young lady in Tanzania. Shamim, she's an activist. She champions climate change in her country, and she's mobilized the community there to fight for their own rights, to do something. So they don't just complain, but do something. And she's doing so much. She is the founder of Doors of Hope in the Tanzania. Actually, I met her through, and this is why connection is important in our circle. Actually met her through the Global Landscape Forum in Nairobi, which mentioned that there's this young lady who's doing this thing, and I think her story is amazing. So I had so many people that suggested by executive producer in Washington, the people they know already who are read in the media. But I stood my ground. I told them, oh, okay, I understand these people are doing this, but allow me to do this story with people who are just doing small things, young people in the continent, because we're talking about the continent that's under siege. But these are young people who are not complaining, who are not just sitting back and whining, but who are mobilizing their communities to do something to remedy the effects of climate change. And that's basically about Eco Warriors of Africa. And since the documentary, it has gotten so much attention. I mean, we've been nominated in different awards. Just November, I was supposed to go to London to receive an award in the Association of International Broadcasting Awards. So there's so much attention. These people that are featured in the documentary, like I mentioned before, my featuring them, they'd not gotten so much media attention, but now they're getting attention. They're everywhere. And that's important because these stories need to be told so that the narrative is spread widespread. If we just concentrate on people who are already known, people who are doing something, but we need to highlight those small stories in the community so that we spread the message. I think that was the essence of Eco Warriors of Africa.
And I love what you've said, you know, first of all, about around using young people and ensuring that stories need to be told. But both you and Adilma are journalists, you know, and oftentimes we see the media concentrates on negative stories. Rarely do we hear young people seeking to plant 1 million trees. That's incredible. So this is just directed to the both of you, you know, what is the role of journalists in telling stories, especially around climate action, you know, and how can we ensure that more journalists are telling these impactful stories, highlighting, you know, the need for indigenous approaches to the work that we do. Adilma, I'll begin with you. How do we ensure that journalists are telling these beautiful stories?
Bien, yo estoy de acuerdo primero en que hay que reconocer que hay narradores, que hay periodistas indígenas que hacen periodismo, que hay narradores locales. Como lo decía el compañero, varios países, varias realidades han sido contadas por otros. Llegan los extranjeros a contarnos, a narrarnos, y nos narran mal la Amazonía. Y esto ha sido histórico. Entonces llegan los financiadores, en este momento la cooperación además está llegando con mucho dinero para el cuidado de la selva, pero también están llegando otras narrativas, se están imponiendo narrativas de afuera y no se ha contado la historia de lo que pasa en este caso en la Amazonía, ya sea de Colombia o de los otros países que conforman la cuenca amazónica, el bosque tropical más grande del mundo. Se ha contado por otros. Yo creo que es el momento primero de reconocer, que los medios reconozcamos que hay periodistas indígenas, que hay narrativas propias de las comunidades y que no es necesario que se cambien esas narrativas propias. Yo creo que hay que, eso por un lado. Lo segundo, que dentro de esas narrativas debemos reconocer que hay historias relacionadas con la espiritualidad y las cosmovisiones de los pueblos, que yo pienso que las sociedades crecieron, las ciudades crecieron dándole la espalda al Amazonas, dándole la espalda a la Amazonía. Y en este momento que se está viendo la necesidad, vuelven a la Amazonía, pero con un imaginario, están equivocados sobre lo que representa la Amazonía. La Amazonía, hay comunidades, en toda la cuenca amazónica hay más de 500 pueblos indígenas. En toda América Latina hay 800 pueblos indígenas. Y me gusta recordar siempre estos números porque son 800 formas distintas de narrar una historia. Y se han narrado desde una sola voz o se han narrado desde una sola mirada y es desde la mirada de afuera. Entonces creo que es importante que fortalecer, acompañar, apoyar a los narradores indígenas, a los narradores locales para que cuenten esas historias. También desde esa mirada de la espiritualidad. En los últimos años han llegado petroleras, mineras, y ellos sí están estudiando la espiritualidad de los pueblos y entran por ahí, entran a explotar, porque si se dan el tiempo, si tienen los recursos para estudiar cómo los pueblos indígenas cuidan sus saberes, sus rezos, sus cantos, y los periodistas no nos hemos preocupado por entender la ritualidad y la espiritualidad de los pueblos. Es momento de hacerlo, pero de la mano con sabios y sabias, periodistas y narradores que están en las comunidades. Y yo creo que también en este momento tenemos que además hacer historias de esperanza, historias de resistencia. Y esas historias son las de nuestras abuelas, las parteras, las cuidadoras de las plantas, las guardias indígenas, mujeres. Hay que darle más voces a las mujeres. Las mujeres han estado invisibilizadas. Hay que darle más voces a las mujeres, pero también darles más voces a las mujeres periodistas y a las narradoras periodistas. Hay una mirada distinta cuando una mujer hace una historia que cuando hace una historia un hombre. Y no con esto quiero decir que los colegas hombres no hacen buen periodismo, hacemos buen periodismo, pero hay una sensibilidad distinta cuando las mujeres hacen historias. Y creo que hay que descubrir un poco más esas narrativas desde el cuidado, porque estamos en un momento que hay que cuidar y hay que restaurar a la tierra. Yo creo, y esto lo he aprendido colaborando con mujeres periodistas indígenas, que una manera de restaurar, de recuperar y de sanar el territorio es con las narrativas, porque hay muchas narrativas de odio. En las redes sociales en este momento hay muchos señalamientos, a los indígenas se les trata de perezosos, de criminales, o sea, hay mucha discriminación también. Entonces yo creo que debemos darle más espacio a las narrativas de esperanza, pero no dejar de investigar. En este momento también, digamos, toda la cuenca amazónica que la integran en más de 6, 7, 8 países, también se ha convertido en una escena del crimen. Están asesinando a defensores ambientales indígenas y no indígenas, pero también están llegando estructuras criminales, mineros ilegales, bandas criminales, narcotraficantes. Digamos, hay un horror de la violencia en la Amazonía, y es justamente porque los pocos recursos que quedan están en la Amazonía, están en nuestros bosques, ¿sí? Entonces ahí es donde está llegando este crimen, y también hay que contarlo también, sí, también hay que investigarlo, y hay que poner esa tecnología que existe hoy, los drones, los mapas satelitales al servicio de proteger y de narrar el cuidado. Cierro un poco esta parte diciendo que debe haber un equilibrio en las narrativas, reconocer a los narradores indígenas, que hayan más narrativas de esperanza, acompañar más a las mujeres que hacen periodismo, y hacer más periodismo de investigación, pero un periodismo de investigación que su relato no sea desde el odio o desde, digamos, solamente que se quede en la denuncia, sino que además incluyen en esas historias las formas como las comunidades están sanando y están cuidando, digamos, a los pueblos indígenas. Yo quisiera leer brevemente y traer a este espacio una de las frases del abuelo Benito Tetellé del corto El canto del Maguaré. Él dice: si no hace bailes, si no hay cantos, pues entonces ese año no hay fruta. En cambio, cuando los sabedores bailan, cuando los sabedores cantan, cuando hay rezos, la gente y la naturaleza se pone contenta. Los árboles, el agua, los pescados están contentos. Entonces ellos se van reproduciendo más, como dar vitamina a toda la naturaleza, a todos los árboles, por decir. Me gusta mucho esa frase porque justamente esos saberes son los que están en riesgo en este momento en la Amazonía. Muchos de los pueblos indígenas ya no están teniendo su espacio para poder hacer sus rituales, ya no tienen tranquilidad para poder cantar, para poder bailar. Y si eso no pasa, hay un desequilibrio digamos, en la relación con la tierra, en relación con la selva. Entonces yo creo que también hay que escuchar más esos mensajes que entre líneas nos están dando nuestros abuelos, porque algo está pasando y algo está pasando grave. Y si no se cuida los saberes de los pueblos, también no va a haber un cuidado de la selva.
I love that. If we don't take care of the knowledge of the people, we won't be able to take care of the knowledge of our results. And Juma, just to quickly circle back to you, especially around telling stories of hope and resistance. I love that by Dilma. How do we ensure that journalists continue to tell those stories? It's not just doom and gloom, but stories of people actually making change in their communities and using indigenous knowledge.
Thank you. In journalism school, we are told that that when a dog bites a man, it's not news. But when a man bites a dog, that's news.
That's news.
Yeah. So it's not that media houses like telling negative stories. I'll take it back to the audience. The audience like negative stories. And the media houses, they're in business. So you'll just sell what you'll be able to sell. You'll not put out something that you'll not be able to sell.
Yes.
And that's a big challenge, especially now. Because take, for example, and that's an example in Kenya. Like when you go to media houses, you'll find there's political editor, business editor, but there's no climate change editor. At least now we're trying to push that. And that's important because we need to enlighten people that these stories are important, so that media houses put in measures that will ensure that there's continuity of telling these such positive stories, especially at this time that the continent is faced with this monster that's climate change. So we need to train even, and I'm glad the Voice of America is now doing that, training even editors on importance of having a climate change desk, an environment desk editor in the newsroom. So we need to start by educating media owners, media executives, media editors, so that they understand. So it's them will be able now to put in climate change editors, environment editors, and that will come with increased reporting, because we'll have continuous stories. And we journalists who are interested in climate change issues, those of us who are passionate about environment, it starts with us. It's upon us to start pushing that narrative. That's why we are telling these stories. That's why I chose to tell positive stories. And I believe that with time, that's going to change something.
I love that. Telling positive stories, and with time, we hope that that's going to change something. You know, Anthony, what do you think the role of aesthetics in your films, particularly in the ones we can see at the festival? What is the role of aesthetics? And what do you think is the role of aesthetics in filmmaking about a world in crisis?
Wow, that's a handful. But let me see, break it through. But just target along with Juma's comment on journalism, in the sense that the beauty about for me, because I do conservation photography as a full-time career, is mainly to use journalism as a style, but for me, documentary and impact is important. So I can't just tell a story and keep quiet. I'll tell a story and figure out how does it now move from the story to actually changing the lives of individuals who are there. I know in journalism there's a Barclay. You tell the story and you disconnect with it. But for us as conservation photographers, we are part and parcel of the story. We need to be able to carry the story from one point to the other. So using beautiful images and beautiful sceneries and beautiful shots, they're meant to just draw people's attention on the beautiful aspects of nature. And in most cases, you'll find like a combination of really beautiful images, and then later learning about how a destructive ecosystem looks like. So like the story of the forest guardian, this particular forest is so beautiful, but if you look at the patches of landscape around it, it has all been turned into agricultural land that is not more sustainable, affecting the beauty of chimpanzees in the region, which are actually endangered species. So in that particular storytelling or editing of the story, I'll bring in the beautiful images of biodiversity, the chimps, the birds, just to draw a society that loves beautiful things, because nobody doesn't want beautiful things. But in the process of feeding in the society with beautiful things, you give like a notation that as much as it's beautiful, it's under threat, and this is the threat that is happening. But then it's not just the threat. There are people who are working together to ensure that this particular threat is minimized, or the impacts of the negative aspect are reduced. So when you watch the film, what's your call to action? What do you want me to do after watching the film? So for instance, for us when I was directing the Forest Guardian, the main aim was to ensure that people plant trees for biodiversity, not just plant selfies and the rest. And also just to relate with that our stories are just within our locality. They're not way far-fetched off. And I think one of the things that actually made for us is that filmmaking or storytelling for a very long time, especially in the natural history space, has been done mostly by people who are not within the African context. So when our own people see beautiful work of cinematography from their own people, it becomes more relatable and easy to relate with. So that's very, very important. So the storyteller is actually very, very important in that particular storytelling process. And if you tell it correctly, they have a bigger impact. Because, for example, we are in this call. All of us have different audience that we interact with. And it's amazing how small definitely the world is, in the sense that Juma's done a story of a place I have been, or technically I'm a reef ranger because I've worked with Cindy and the team there over a given period of time. And it's seeing a story being pushed on a different dimension, different view, makes us combination of all of us have a different lens of looking at things. It just depends on what is really appealing. And that's why in the African context, we had that one person who would tell that story, because he will use humor, he will use satire in the process, just to make people feel like this story has to be there. This story has to be. But in the process, the most important thing for me when it comes to the aesthetic beauty of all the films I've watched is that there's a call to action in that particular process. And that, for me, that is what stands out for me. Like, every film has a call to action. Like, you watch it and you're like, I want to do something. Yeah.
Thank you. And I love that. It has a call to action. It's relevant and relatable. And I want to circle back to Prince Papa, because he raised very many important questions and conversations for us to have in the short time that we have. But and I'd love to hear from everybody. But, you know, how important is it for us to ensure that young people's voices are heard? And this is the final question. I'm going to throw it out to everyone. And a trick question: have you watched each other's documentaries? The first person to say yes gets a sweet. But I'm kidding. I'd love to hear from everybody. How important is it for us to get young people involved? And we are beginning to wrap up the show. So very short and sweet answers. I'll begin with you, Adilma. Then we could wrap up. Short, sweet, you know. Yeah, we are wrapping up. Thanks.
Gracias. Me recuerda un poco lo que mencionaba Antoni del llamado a la acción. Con el corto El canto de Maguaré, palabra de consejo de Duduji, nuestro llamado a la acción es que más jóvenes, indígenas y no indígenas, hablen con sus abuelos, ¿sí? Que se sienten a conversar para justamente tener muchas voces sobre el cuidado de la selva, sobre el cuidado de las plantas, así estén en la ciudad, cómo cuidar la planta, cómo sembrar. Yo recuerdo que mi mamá y mi abuela me hablaban del ciclo de la luna, y con el ciclo de la luna se hacen las siembras, volver un poco a esos cuidados y volver a hablar con nuestros abuelos. Hay una desconexión y muy fuerte en este momento con todas las redes sociales. Los jóvenes están metidos en TikTok, están en redes, pero no están conversando, no tienen unas conversaciones justamente sobre el cuidado, y creo que es un llamado, es una invitación importante, digamos, ese por un lado. Por el otro, yo creo que hay que acercar a los jóvenes a estas narrativas, estas nuevas narrativas, contar historias innovadoras, microcortos, fotodocumentales, justamente con estos nuevos formatos que ahora mismo nos cautivan, los reels, pero que haya un contenido de valor, enseñar un poco y darles saber que hay que compartir historias con contenido de valor, que denuncien tal vez, que informen, que eduquen, que hagan pedagogía, para justamente que lo que se teje un poco en las redes sociales, pero también en comunidad, también en familia, nos puedan servir para contar mejores historias. Yo invitaría a los jóvenes a que hablen más con sus abuelos y abuelas, que revivan esas historias en comunidad, y que esos mensajes también los conviertan en pequeñas historias.
Thank you so much. I'll quickly ask Juma, then Prince and Anthony, short and sweet, you know, two-liners, letting us know your insights and around young people and the importance of them to get involved. Yes, over to you, Juma, Prince, and then Anthony.
Look, the biggest victims of a changing climate now will be young people.
Absolutely.
Those are the people who are going to be affected by this, what's happening now. Now, if something is happening, and I dare say that climate change is it's something that's really going to affect young people more than anybody else. So it's a matter of life and death for young people, I'll say. So what do young people need to do? They don't need to sit back and just complain. These young people have a role to change the narrative and to change the effects of climate change. So when you look at, and I'm glad that young people are increasingly being invited to these events and getting involved, but we need to get a best way to get them involved in a meaningful way, not just invite them to events so that they attend and all that and that. Young people, so the bottom line is that climate change is changing, and it's young people who will have solution to climate change.
I love it. Involve young people in a meaningful way, not just as props. Spoken like a true journalist, Juma. Over to you,
Kindly
Prince.
reassign me the credentials, sorry.
Sorry?
I dropped off. Yes, I dropped.
Prince, over to you, and then Anthony.
Yeah, thank you, Natasha. So with us, we believe that, I don't know, whoever this quote is attributed to, is that we have inherited this planet from the young and the future generations. And within Laudato Si movement, we believe in a sense of people, human beings, being stewards of creation. A steward is not the owner of what they have, but someone who acts like the guardian of that. And for us, we believe that the creator and the future generation and the youth are the people who gave us this planet to live on, to act as stewards. And as a steward, as a good steward, you must return the property in the best way possible. If not in the state it was granted to you, maybe aspire to return it in a more better position. That's why we have to, if we look at rapid consumption of the fossil fuel industry, we have to ask ourselves, where are we heading to? Are we going to return this property to the owners in a better way or in a bad way? But as the rate that we are having it right now, we are not, if we don't change, and that change comes from various ways. One of them for us is using documentaries like everyone here. I think we do this to create that change, that we want a better place somewhere tomorrow or in the near future. So if we don't do that, then of course we will not be good stewards. And being good stewards is looking at the energy itself, looking at leadership itself, and ensuring that when we leave, when we exit this stage, then the person coming next finds somewhere good, conducive to stay in.
Yeah.
So for me, it's young people have, I think young people are both the problem and the solution. Though I actually put it forward. I don't know how to put it. Let me be the devil advocate on this. But young people being the problem is that they have to listen to what's going on, and they have to understand that they have a role to play. And in that particular process, they need to also understand that there are people who have been ahead of them that have gone through similar challenges and are trying to resolve them. So what they need to do is change their mindset in the terms that society is not just about making an income or making a profit or living a nice life, but basically life that is sustainable and minimal enough to be able to conserve the ecosystem. So for me, that is mostly for young people. Like, as much as you want to advocate for climate change, is you need to understand what climate change is and how exactly, what does it mean? Because you are young and you're communicating information. So that information needs to be able to be correct enough to inspire other young people. So you need to be able to spend time to feed that information. So yes, young people are important, but they need to be able to understand that these particular aspects are not just for say. They're mainly meant to be able to be consumed and be able to be taken to action at the same time. So for me, young people are my clients. Why I say people are my clients is because I need them to understand that environmental conservation is not an elite group thing. It's not a specific individual task. Whether you are a business person, whether you are an engineer, whether you're a doctor, whether you're a tout, whether you're anything that you want to be in planet Earth, whatever you do with passion, understand and ensure that environmental aspects are a very key component. And if anything affects those particular systems, they affect your social, economic, and political status in every particular space. So for me, it's not just about the young people, but also a combination of us who are in this particular space to be able to understand that conservation is very, very important. And I think the more we tell impactful stories, the more we reach as many people as possible. Yeah, so I think that is what I'll say about young people.
Absolutely. And thank you so much to my fantastic and phenomenal panelists, Anthony, Edilma, Juma, Prince, and Samuel, who was a bit off and on, for continuing to tell amazing stories and shifting narratives one story at a time. And congratulations for being filmmakers at the New Vision for Earth Film Festival. You're doing amazing work. Thank you for your contributions. And from myself at Africa No Filter, thank you for joining us. And we hope that you continue to enjoy the festival. Have a lovely day. And from all of us, goodbye. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha.
Thank you, guys. And thank you. You guys are doing amazing work. I can't wait to watch what you're doing. And
Gracias,
congratulations.
gracias.
Congratulations to each one of you.
Thank you.